In preparing to shoot these DVDs, a number of fans put forth a number of questions about things they want to hear answered in the course of these DVDs. We've compiled those questions, and they will be asked here today by a volunteer who was outfitted with a microphone. So what is the first question that everyone wants to know? If you look back at history, the ancient Babylon was a point of intersection for a lot of different cultures. It was a port of trade. It was a place where a lot of business got done, also very corrupt, also very political. So on the one hand, that represented Babylon 5. In addition to that, we had Babylonian creation myth, which stipulated that the universe was created through the intercession or the balance between order and chaos. And that of course, was the very nature of the Vorlon shadow conflict. And those who really wanted to get sort of a peek ahead of what that conflict was could easily have gone back to early Babylonian creation myth, and what we did on B5 very closely parallels what was done in Babylonian creation myth. Why the number 5? Well, the first 4 stations were destroyed or lost, and I figured 5 was a good number. It's a 5-year storyline, and the number 5 kept coming up over and over and over again. I figured Babylon 14 was just too many stations, and it just felt right to me. So the answer to the fans' questions of why Babylon 5 is, that's it. Babylon 5 is a history of the B5 universe at this particular time. It begins in a given year, ends in a given year. But as if you were doing a story about the history of World War II, World War I obviously happened before that, the Korean War happened after that. The elements that set up World War II were set up in World War I. Things that happened in World War II speed off into the Cold War. But it was a snapshot of these number of years. In Babylon 5, we took a snapshot of those 5 years, but things that happened beforehand influenced this, and things that happened here were affected later on. So I thought, let's just tell this 5-year story, and that's done. That history is done. But life, both fictionally and in the course of our own lives, does go on. And when the opportunity came up to revisit that world, even though the main deal was done, the main story was told, I accomplished the goal I set out to accomplish of telling one story across 5 years, the chance to go back and, as hobbits say, fill in the corners was very attractive. I'm not sure I would go back necessarily to do a whole series, but to take individual small stories about Sheridan, about the Len, about Londo, and tell those stories and revisit those places which are very dear to me, had a great deal of attractiveness for me. So when the opportunity came up, I said, let's do not a movie, not a big thing, little short stories around these characters. One of the driving forces behind these DVDs was the fans who, after 5 years of DVD sales, have made this a big hit for Warner Brothers and have been asking for more stories, to the point of there are now a number of fan sites out there that have fan fiction, fans asking for more novels to be written. When you come to a fictional universe, you come there to play, to hang out with people you happen to like and want to be around. And there's been a desire there for some time amongst the fans to have more tales set in the Babylon 5 universe. So this is our recognizing of that. Obviously there's Warner Brothers that wants to make more Babylon 5, but the flip side of it is the fans want more stories. They want to hear more of what happened. How did Sheridan live his life later on? What did happen to Glenn? How did Londo get to where he ended up? So in looking at all those questions, we're trying to answer these for the fans and give them back some of what they wanted.
Talk to us a little bit about your people studies.
I have a degree in clinical psychology, which therefore says I like to people watch and I like to observe those around me and study them. Usually that involves rats running a maze, but in lieu of rats, actors will do. And on Babylon 5, I would tend to watch the actors at lunch or watch them frolicking amongst their own selves and listening for hints about the personalities, and then take those hints and those traits and work them into the characters. What I found is if you can take an actor's actual personality and invest that into the character, when they hit those lines in those moments, there is that sense of verisimilitude and of truth that comes out. So for instance, with Delenn, Mira had come from the former Yugoslavia, had come through great war-torn times and was an advocate for peace and traveled from place to place across all the borders and said, I'm going to cross borders whether you like me to or not. And therefore, investing in Delenn, those same tendencies. When Delenn would talk about the futility and stupidity of war, you could see Mira in her eyes and what she believed. When I hear Jerry Doyle talking about being claustrophobic, my first thought is to put him into an air duct as a character, knowing that the fear that I see in his eyes will be real. So I've always tried to take wherever possible moments from the actors' lives and put them in. Very often they're surprised to see them there, but that comes from just listening very quietly and observing. I don't tend to talk a whole lot except on camera, but I listen a lot, which is every writer's tool. You listen to people and you put back in what you hear. So for me, the actors themselves are probably the best source of inspiration for character moments. Plot, whole different situation. But for character moments, it's great to have them as personalities available to you to play with and use to your own benefit. Something that I saw happening on the B5 Lost Tales set, which is evocative of the past of Babylon 5, is that the extras tend to hang out with their own kind in the following sense. During Babylon 5, we would have extras playing Narns, Centauri, Minbari, and at lunch, Narns all ate together, Minbari all ate together, Centauri all ate together. And I was observing this, again, pulling out the background in clinical psychology, and thought, this is interesting. We have self-segregation happening because of how people look. So one day I said to our extras director, take that Narn extra and tomorrow put him in Centauri makeup. It didn't matter, but they were there almost every day. And he put the extra in Centauri makeup, which of course are the enemies of the Narns. And that day at lunch, he wanted to sit with his usual friends and comrades, but there was an odd sort of distance there, and they were all kind of bugged by his new appearance. So the next day at lunch, still in the Centauri makeup, he was sitting with the Centauri. To me, actors and extras as a producer can become great cat toys to exploit for my own personal amusement and to see the psychology of our own social tendencies to break up by groups, whether it's Narn, Centauri, Caucasian, African American, upper class, lower class. We seek what we know of ourselves in others. And so that to me is a lot of the fun of being able to watch people in this kind of an environment. In looking back at the experience of directing Babylon 5, I approached this with great trepidation. My initial hope was just not to screw it up, and that was, if I could just achieve that, I'd be okay. But after the first day or two, I really began to enjoy it quite a bit. And in retrospect, it was a great time. At the moment, it was combinations of fear, terror, vast and quickly learned humility, and generally speaking, a sense of, am I really up to this? Will they all see that I'm a fake? Which, of course, I think is everyone's reaction when you're doing something you haven't done a whole lot of. But by the second or third day, I began to really get the sense that I could actually pull this thing off. The cast was great, the crew was great. However, I may have screwed up here and there in small ways. There were deficiencies I might have had. The crew was able to step in and save my butt repeatedly over the course of production. And in retrospect, it was fun. At the time, you're never sure if it's fun or not, but in retrospect, it was fun. Will I ever do it again? Hell no. But for this one time, it was good to set the template for the show. And I think that looking back at the entire show, now that it's been assembled, we're in post-production. I've seen the director's cut, the producer's cut, some of the CGI. I think it is a worthy chapter in the Babylon 5 storyline. Rangers had its own feel, Crusade had its own feel. This, when I watched it again today, as a matter of fact, I thought, this feels like Babylon 5 to me. We have reopened that door. And to stand in that doorway and bask in that light, for me, is a lot of fun. So for overall, I would say for me, it was a great experience. The question has come up from a number of different people, why are you directing? Now, I have tried not to take this personally. People ask, why are you wearing that? And you begin to wonder, why am I wearing that? Is there a problem with what I am wearing? Is it inappropriate somehow what I am wearing? Why are you asking the question? So I've been coming to the shoot, coming to prep, coming to post, and the main question I get is, why are you and why did you direct this? Not that I'm sullen, not that I expect there's any kind of agenda behind these questions. Could be. I'll let it go. As to the question itself, why am I directing this? When there are many good and talented directors around, and there are, Babylon 5 had a range of wonderful directors. Mike Vihar, Jesus Trevino, Janet Greek, many others. Why me? There's that question again, why me? Every morning I get up and I say, why me? And now others have done the same thing. I think that's only fair. Why me? Because the Babylon 5 universe has changed and has grown. New technologies are available to us now to tell those stories. And I wanted to set the template. I live in the Babylon 5 universe in my own twisted way. I like going to that place and I see it in my head. So I thought, let me get in here initially, set the tone, create the template, create the Babylon 5 universe as it can be done now with the technology that we have. And having done that, I can now hand it off to other more qualified, more respected, more appreciated directors than myself. So now that Helen Keller has finished directing, we bring on someone else to do a much better job. But for those who have asked the question, why am I directing? The ultimate answer is because I can. Thank you. When you direct or produce a show, if you actually do it right, which I have yet to achieve, but someday I'm hoping for it, the key to it is that you prepare properly long ahead of time. So when you get to the set, it's almost anticlimactic. You surround yourself with the right people, with the right resources, so that there's a buffer around you that protects and insulates you, so that you are almost in a way guarded from your own stupidity. And you can turn to someone around you who's brave enough and comfortable enough to say, if you're doing it wrong, by the way, you're doing it wrong. So the key really is hiring the right people. And to take you through some of the folks involved in Babylon 5, The Lost Tales, because the director and the producers and the writers tend to get the most coverage, but it's really done by and made by those people who are on the ground running the darn thing. The key person, probably after the director, in terms of really nailing down the look of the show, is the director of photography. In this case, Carl Herman. What the director of photography does, the DP, we call it in the US, the DOP, they call it in Canada, they have the extra O for Lord knows what reason. He sits on the set with the director side by side, and he lights the set, he creates the ambiance, he works with the camera operator to determine which angles are best. So often I can say to a DP, give me an overshot for these two actors. But there's like 12 different kinds of overs you can do. You can do a wide over, a dirty over, a raking over. And the director of photography has to look at all the elements that are there, see, of these 12 ways to do it, here's the best 2 or 3, given our resources and our lighting package and where things are right now. And you then say, okay, of these 3, this is the one I like in terms of the look of the show. And he then goes off and tells the camera guys where to put the dolly track, where to put the camera, where to put the lights, where to shade things. He really is the guy who creates the look of the show. As much as directors do it, no question about it, it's the DP on the ground who does the actual heavy lifting on that. And our DP in this, Carl Herman, was extraordinary. He was an absolute essential part of my process. And if I came through this unscathed at all, it is largely through his kind intercession. So on this DVD, I want to make sure I give a special shout out to Carl Herman for the great job that he did on Babylon 5: The Lost Tales. The director tends to focus on the big picture stuff, the emotions, the scene, the logic, what's the story being told. And that has to get filtered down into the trenches so that everyone knows what their part of it happens to be. Elise Leet Rogers was our first assistant director, our first AD, and she is the person who, in this case, when I say, here's the grand picture, She can then break it down into all its component parts and make sure that the grand picture is executed by all those component parts. She is the person who takes the script, as with all productions, breaks it down, what's the schedule, what's the day out of days, which days will the actors be needed for, what sets will we be shooting in on what particular days. It's really the technical work of creating a television show or a movie. What the first AD also does, and Elise was very good at this, is keeping track of what the shots are to be done in the course of a day. When you get into a particular scene, you can dig in so far on the emotion, working with the actors, that you forget how much time is going by. Much of your time on set is spent just waiting around for something to happen or for the camera to get ready, and you're sitting in a chair watching the monitor where nothing's happening a great deal of your time. But when you're actually shooting, time can go by very quickly. And the first AD's job is to sit there, look at the watch, and say, you have to wrap up this scene. And if indeed you haven't got all your coverage, you and she will sit down to say, okay, how can we finish up this sequence in a fewer number of camera setups? How can we finish it up in a shorter fashion? We do it all in just the master shot. We just do one over and then walk out. Whatever it is, she was always there to work with me to keep track of where we are and to set up this scene, prep the next scene, so that we're always going in a smooth, seamless fashion from point A to point B. Because it's very easy to get lost, not just in the green screen, but in the story and in the moment, and not realize where you are in the production. In this case, Elise was absolutely there at my elbow the entire time, doing an amazing job to keep this show moving ahead. And again, could not be done without her. When you're directing, what you have to always be very, very mindful of is that all the pieces you have line up. If you cover an actor from the front and the side, do you need him from this side as well? If you have an actor coming into the scene, do you cover them only from the front as they walk in? Do you cover them from the back? You have to be constantly aware of the geometry of where your cameras are, because if you're not careful, you can miss a piece of coverage, and when you're in the editing bay, you can literally discover we don't have the shot we need to bridge A to B, to bring the character into the room or out of the room. Whatever it is, you lack something. For that purpose, you need to have a really good script supervisor on hand who, as you are shooting, notes down on a script, 2-shot, close-up, wide shot, master, and logs in all the shots you have so you can turn to that person and say, do I have everything that I need? And in this case, Christine Wilson, who was our script supervisor and continuity person, could say either, yes, we have everything we need, the pieces are all there, or you didn't cover it from this angle, you may want to grab that while the camera is here, and it tracks what was and wasn't done. If you do a pickup where you're shooting a whole scene, the master is fine. You want to cut in at some point, she will then say, okay, well, this actor was in this spot at that moment in the scene, so I want to pick it up from here and make sure the actor is standing over there. So this is all part of the mechanism of filmmaking that is so essential to getting it done in a reasonable fashion.
Okay, that's a cut. Okay, so we're off of that high wise. Okay, we're done with the high wise. We're going to come down, set up the camera to cover